So if we look at the major brain regions, we have cerebrum here, also known as telencephalon. On the cerebrum, you need to know lobes. So up here we have frontal lobe. On top, parietal lobe. In the very back, occipital lobe. And then on the side, lower down on the side, is temporal lobe. We have the big groove in the center that's called longitudinal fissure or longitudinal cerebral fissure. Either name is fine. And then we have the two hemispheres, the right and left cerebral hemisphere. The cortex, which is the folded surface of gray matter, you can see the ridges that stick up here. Those are gyri, and the grooves in between, those are sulci or sulcus. On the inferior view, I think we put some of them away here that were better. We have olfactory bulbs. Grab this one right here, I don't know if that helps. These are olfactory bulbs. They're part of the olfactory pathway. The olfactory nerves would actually connect to the bulb and would be going into the nasal cavity. We also have, from a sagittal cut of the cerebrum, if we open up into the center, you see corpus callosum as that band of white matter. Just underneath corpus callosum is a very thin wall. The wall is called the septum pellucidum, and the fluid-filled space here is called lateral ventricle. All right, that's for the cerebrum or telencephalon. If we go to diencephalon, which is the sort of deep part underneath the cerebrum, this is all diencephalon. We have most of the tissue here being thalamus, and in the middle of thalamus, this tissue that was cut through that in life would be connected between the two halves. That's the massa intermedia, or the intermediate mass, which is really large on the sheep and smaller when we look at a human. There's also a sort of donut-shaped fluid-filled space that would go around here when this is all intact. That is the third ventricle. And then on the inferior surface of the diencephalon, there is this X-like structure where the optic pathway, the optic nerves would be coming together. So that X is optic chiasm. All right, we're going to go down to look at brain stem, which includes this midbrain and the pons and the medulla oblongata. But if we come back up here to midbrain, in this view of midbrain, these tracks here, these are bundled axons. They're called cerebral peduncles. So there's a right and a left cerebral peduncle. If we look behind here and back, you can see two really large bumps and then two smaller bumps underneath. Those are together called the corpora quadrigemina. All right, and then back to front view, here's the cerebral peduncles. I'm going to open it up. In the center of our midbrain is a little channel that fluid from third ventricle would travel through to get farther down. So that is called the aqueduct. Farther down brainstem, we have this bulge here called the pons, and behind the pons we have cerebellum. So cerebellum has a couple parts you need to know. The center, I'm going to grab this brain here, the center of the cerebellum that has sort of a curvy ridge, that is called the vermis. You can see all the folds and the sort of wrinkled cerebellum. The folds are called folia. And in the cross section, or sagittal cut here, you can see the white matter inside, and that white matter is called the arbor vitae. All right. Also, if I pull the cerebellum a little bit away from the brainstem, there's a space here that in life would be filled with fluid. That space is the fourth ventricle. We'll come back to brainstem view, so we can see whole brainstem. That was pons. Now this part here is the medulla oblongata. It's connected to the spinal cord. So this spinal cord here, in cross section, we can see spinal cord has a little channel that runs through the middle of it. That's called the central canal. So cerebrospinal fluid from the ventricles would keep flowing through that central canal. And real quick, the secondary brain vesicles, which has to do with how the brain develops or forms. The cerebrum is also called telencephalon. That's its secondary brain vesicle. If we get inside and see the diencephalon, that is also its name based on its secondary brain vesicle, so diencephalon. The midbrain is called mesencephalon. The pons and cerebellum are part of metencephalon. And then medulla oblongata is part of the myelencephalon. So mesencephalon, metencephalon, myelencephalon. We also had telencephalon and diencephalon.